Guys, whoever's on there, I'd like to welcome you to the 2022 version of the Mid-Atlantic Logger Training Webinar Series. This is our first one of the year. I think we have 6 of them scheduled. And trying to advance my slides. They don't seem to want to advance very well here. Let's try this again. There we go. So today's webinar is all about legislation and other issues that are affecting loggers. And we're going to get that from a national viewpoint, a national perspective on this. So we have national level representatives from both the Forest Resource Association and the American Loggers Council. They're joining us tonight to discuss legislative issues and other concerns that are affecting today's logging community. Go through a few housekeeping items here first. Most of us are getting used to using Zoom, but just for those that may not have been on here a lot, I want to thank you for registering. This session is being recorded. All participants are muted and video is off. So if you don't like being recorded, you don't have to worry about you're actually not on here, so we're not seeing any of you in the recording. Some Zoom tips. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A button, which should be at the bottom of your screen. If you run your cursor down there, it should pop up. Also, any comments during the presentation, there's a chat box at the bottom of the screen. You can type in a chat there very quickly, and we will be monitoring both of those. And if you want to ask a question out loud, there's a little raised hand symbol at the bottom of the page also. And if you hit that, one of us will be monitoring that, and that'll give us a chance to open your mic up and give you the chance to ask your question or speak to us in person on that. You will get continuing education credits for this. You'll earn 1 CEU per session. Within 1 week of the session, certificates will be submitted to each state's logger program and also emailed to the participants. Now, your credits are only going to be submitted to those state programs where you actually included your logger number. So if you're somebody that maybe is a master logger in Ohio and also registered as a logger in West Virginia, if you're in both of those states, you probably should have made sure you entered both of those numbers in the sign up. If you didn't, don't worry about it. Just get the certificate to the other one. I'm sure they'll take care of that. So here's a little bit of a list of some of the upcoming webinars. Tonight's, of course, is the legislation issues. February 22nd, we have drones for loggers. Going to be very interesting. March 29th is dealing with stressors in the logging industry. April 26th, current logging issues in your state. May 31st is the business side of logging, and on June 28th, what loggers need to know about invasive plants. So quite a varied group of training sessions coming up here over the next 6 months. So with that, do any of you guys have any questions? Any of the participants? If you do, I'll give you just a minute here to type them into your Q&A box or the chat. And if I don't see anything come up here in the next little bit, then we'll get on to introducing tonight's presenters. Okay, not seeing anything. We'll move on. But again, if you have a question anytime, use the Q&A or use the chat function and we'll get to you. So we've got 3 presenters joining us tonight. I'll introduce all 3 of them now and then turn it over. Scott Dane is going to be our first speaker tonight. He's the Executive Director of the American Loggers Council. And I'll let each of them tell a little bit about themselves as they come up on board here. Second will be Tim O'Hara, FRA Vice President of Government Affairs. And also the Lake States Region Manager. And also joining him from FRA, which is the Forest Resource Association, is Jeff Jenkins, and he's the FRA Appalachian Region Consultant. So he's the guy that anybody in the Mid-Atlantic logger area here will be talking to if necessary. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Dane, and let me stop sharing this so that you don't see me. Scott, it's all yours.
Brad, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this and talk about these national agenda items that the American Loggers Council and our associate partners are working on, in DC primarily. Before I start, I just want to mention that I'm the new executive director of the American Loggers Council. I was hired June 1st of last year after my predecessor, Danny Drucker, retired after 20 years. Prior to coming to the American Loggers Council, I was executive director of the Associated Contract Loggers and Truckers in Minnesota for 17 years. It was a great job, but when the opportunity came to apply for the national position, I thought it would be a great challenge and opportunity to bring some of the skills that I had come across or developed in Minnesota in over 17 years to the national level. So I'm having a lot of fun. Today I'm in Louisiana, meeting with the Louisiana Loggers Association, and this morning I met with the Louisiana Loggers Council. I'm taking a side break on that to participate tonight. And so as we talk about national issues, it reminds me of a simple philosophy on how to get things done. And somebody shared this with me one time, and he said that his father told him, son, if you want to be successful in life, find out what people are buying and sell it to them. Simple as that. So we kind of incorporate that philosophy in our legislative efforts in Washington, D.C. this year. We know that the Biden administration is focusing on carbon sequestration, on wildfire mitigation, and other things along those lines. So we are part of that agenda that the Biden administration has. So we have had meetings with the Biden administration in DC and shared with them our legislative agenda. Our legislative agenda is fourfold, actually five. We just added something this week, which I'll talk about. But the first one is the timber industry's role in climate change mitigation. So we point out that forests are renewable resources that provide environmental, economic, recreational, and habitat benefits to society. Forest management is key to capitalizing on the multiple benefits of healthy forests, from carbon sequestration to reducing wildfires. These efforts are mutually beneficial and can coexist. This is not one of those net sum zero philosophies. In fact, a recent finding by the U.S. Forest Service participated in acknowledged that a warming climate has extended wildlife season for obvious reasons. However, the study found that climate change accounts for just 14%. 53% of that is attributable to heavy fuels. And so I'm encouraged in recent developments, recent announcements out of the White House, as well as out of the U.S. Forest Service and USDA, that people are recognizing that forest management is part of the solution. So that is one of the things that we are pursuing with them. And as part of that is biomass, carbon neutrality, and renewable energy recognition. We have a lot of hazardous fuels that they're targeting to come off of these high fire areas, particularly out west. And so what are we going to do with that, those hazardous fuels, those small diameter, unmerchantable species? Well, the only use for them is biomass. But we don't have a biomass industry out there to utilize that resource. So the renewable fuel standard does allow for renewable fuels to be produced from forest-based feedstock. The only problem is the EPA, who administers the RFS, does not recognize biomass as anything more than tops and limbs. So that's a misinterpretation on their part. We've been working with the U.S. Forest Service. In fact, the U.S. Forest Service has set up a team to prioritize addressing that issue. And so I think if we can address that issue and resolve it, I was just on the phone with another company that's looking at building 80 biofuel facilities across the country. Once we get this EPA thing resolved, it will open up significant new markets across the country. Timber industry workforce development. That's a big challenge, obviously. And the American Loggers Council is addressing that through the Future Careers in Logging legislation that has got bipartisan support. It simply would allow logging families to have their children who want to continue with the next generation of loggers in the family to go out into the woods and work in mechanized equipment when they are 16 and 17 years old, just like farmers can do today. It's no different. If we don't have the ability to train up the next generation, it's going to impact the future viability of the forest, the logging industry infrastructure. Transportation obviously is an extremely large challenge, not just in the timber industry, but across the country, with a shortage of 80,000 trucks nationwide across all sectors. But it's also a challenge within the timber industry. We've got people that have wood piled up but can't move it to market. So a couple of things that can be done on that, and one is safer routes, which FRA, and Tim will talk about that, has been working on as well. And that would allow states to allow trucks at the state level, state weights, at the state weights to access the interstate. Now that's a nationwide approach, and it's never gotten out of Congress, unfortunately. So we think maybe we need to look at some different strategies under interstate access, because interstates will be safer and quicker, resulting in less truck trips, which is less carbon emissions, right back to find out what they're buying and sell it to them. So we're looking at more of a targeted approach. If each state was to identify corridors, high priority corridors of the interstate that they could use without doing the entire state, then that might be more palatable, a smaller bite to allow access to the interstate and take incremental steps on this. As an example, in 2015, the state of Minnesota took that approach and succeeded in securing a 23-mile corridor on the interstate around Duluth and Cloquet, Minnesota, for up to 99,000 pounds. So that's another example of an option and a precedent. And that's the biggest thing. We've got that language already. We can share that with other states, and they can replicate that and point out that it's already been done in Minnesota. Who wants to let Minnesota be the leader, right? So, play one against the other. And have your state say, well, if Minnesota's can do it, we can do it too. And then the final part of transportation is there's a move that occurs on occasion where state highways are absorbed into the interstate system. Routes that could be used at one time cannot be used at the same weights that they were being used at once they're absorbed into the interstate system. I know that FRA and the American Loggers Council also worked on those exemptions, those grandfathering, and succeeded in North Carolina and another state too. I can't remember which one it was. So that's important for each state to get out ahead of. And so in case that does happen, it doesn't further complicate transportation. So the final thing is federal timber availability. We're working with our western states on addressing the federal timber availability. We've got mills in South Dakota closing after 50 years of operation because the Black Hills Forest could not put up the timber that was necessary to keep it operational. That's extremely unfortunate. So federal timber is a big issue in certain regions, and that's one thing we're working on with the U.S. Forest Service. The final thing, which I mentioned there's 4, but there's 5, is the PATH program. And the PATH program is a pandemic assistance for timber harvesters and haulers. It was funded at $200 million. It was unprecedented that the timber industry would receive any aid, as they never have before, like so many other sectors. However, the demand for the program was almost $400 million. So there were significant cuts and reductions in the amount of assistance that was provided to loggers and truckers that were eligible. 5,000 loggers were eligible, loggers and truckers, and they received, like I said, $200 million in assistance. Now, as we're talking about the certain states that are involved in this, I'm looking at Ohio right now. 75 companies in Ohio received $3.2 million. However, if the program had been fully funded, they would have received $6 million. I think we're looking at Delaware. Delaware, there was only one application that was funded. It received $29,000, but it would have been eligible for $42,000. And then we were talking about Virginia and West Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. Virginia had 242 applications funded for a total of almost $10 million, but they would have been eligible for $19 million. And West Virginia had 190 applications that were funded for $6.6 million, but they would have been eligible for $12 million. So the American Loggers Council has submitted a supplemental funding request to Congress, as well as the White House for that matter, requesting another $185 million to, in essence, backfill the shortfall of the program and fully fund the applicants at the original formula that unfortunately had to be reduced because of the high demand for assistance. So those are the things that we're working on. I know that we're dovetailing with some other efforts with FRA as well, and the collaboration only makes everybody stronger. So this time I'll turn it over to my friend and associate Tim O'Hara with FRA. And if it's okay with you, I'll have to drop off of the meeting.
Yeah, before Tim takes over here, Scott, I know you do have to drop off. I thought maybe we'd just open up for a couple questions. I don't see any that have popped up, but one that came to mind for me was, I wondered if you saw any other states do kind of creative things with truck weights this year, with the pandemic and that type of thing. So in Ohio, our governor actually allowed trucks to haul, instead of 80,000 pounds, they went up to 90,000 pounds. Now there were some stipulations they had to meet, but that is still in effect here in Ohio. So I didn't know if you had, seen anything similar to that.
Other states have done the identical thing is what you're talking about. I can't remember off the top of my head because I'm trying to get a handle on all 30 states as I'm running around the country. But other states have done it, and it's still in effect as well. I was just in Georgia. That's what it was 3 or 4 days ago. And I think Georgia did it too, and it's still in effect.
Great. We did see a comment here in the chat saying thank you for your time, and it was very good information. So one of the loggers want to make sure we thank you. So if anybody else has a question for Scott, get it up there really quickly. Otherwise, we'll let him go on. He's got some other commitments tonight. Well, Scott, I'm not seeing anything. So thank you again so much. That was really good information. Tell the guys in Louisiana hi for me if you see Buck or any of those guys.
Yeah, he's nice. I met with him this morning, and we're having dinner tomorrow night.
Okay, well, tell him hi for me. And thank you again for stepping in here tonight, and we'll turn it over to Tim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. A couple other states, California, North Carolina, both have the highway weights increase. Let me get my camera on. Good evening, everybody. I'm Tim O'Hara. I'm a Vice President of Government Affairs for Forest Resources Association. I've worked a variety of jobs over my career: Tennessee Valley Authority, public, private sector, served on faculty at Oklahoma State University, was a woodlands manager at Packaging Corporation of America in International Falls, Minnesota, and served several years with Minnesota Forest Industries, a trade association, and last few years here with Forest Resources Association. So I am going to share some slides. I'm going to shut my video off so I have the bandwidth to do so. So bear with me while I get the slides up. Okay, Karen, is that, can you see the slides? Just give me a.
Looks good, Tim.
All right, perfect. Just a little bit about FRA. We are a trade association, and what we like to say is we represent the wood supply chain. Right now we have roughly 330 members, and we've really had a fairly good growth during the pandemic. We felt frankly, we were concerned about losing members over the course of the pandemic, which we all know has been going into its third year. But we picked up roughly 30 new members in that time frame. So our membership includes like I said, the wood fiber supply chain. We have loggers, we have trucking groups, we have allied businesses, all the way through lumber manufacturers, paper, pulp, and engineered wood products. So our what's also unique about FRA is that we have 6 regions. Jeff here, you'll hear later from tonight. He's from the Appalachian region, but you can see how we're divided up across the United States and respective staff that run each of these regions. And I encourage you to talk to Jeff if you have any questions about FRA membership or just general questions on what we can do to involve you in networking with others in the forest product sector. So one of the things we developed early on during the COVID pandemic was this wood supply chain. And this was really useful in helping legislators understand that, you need to have the entire fiber supply chain recognized as essential workers. I think, I don't know if it was Ohio or not, Brad, but one of the mid-Atlantic states and others, they would recognize that, hey, we need tissue, but they didn't recognize the entire supply chain. They would, in that instance, shut down logging operations, but yet, tissue and certain paper products were named essential for the economy. So if we just run through this supply chain, you can look at the forest land. And as Scott mentioned, forests are getting a great deal of attention right now in their role in being a natural solution to climate change. Wood products are being recognized to store carbon after the trees are harvested and renewed. And what we're going to see here, likely, in the Build Back Better plan, which likely will not move forward, but there was, I believe, $27 billion in that plan for climate solutions on forest lands. And I think the avenue which that money will be targeted will be through the Farm Bill, which is legislation passed every 5 years. And that bill directs billions and billions of dollars to a variety of programs, and forestry is one of those programs. So you could see a lot of those provisions in the Build Back Better plan will probably slide over to the Farm Bill and get back to some of the carbon credits and smart forestry practices that the administration has been pushing for forest lands. Reforestation, currently in the US, there's a 3 to 5 year backlog of reforestation. The Forest Service lands itself have a 5 million acre backlog of planting trees. In the infrastructure bill, the Replant Act, whose main architect was Senator Stabenow up in Michigan, provided additional funding by removing the reforestation cap on federal lands so they could plant more trees. And what they plan to do is plant 1.2 billion trees over 10 years. One thing they are missing in that legislation, they're going to increase capacity of nurseries. They're going to provide acres, obviously the burned acres to plant on, but there's a real challenge in recruiting labor to plant trees. And, FRA has been working to ease restrictions on getting that labor. 85% of the trees planted each year in the United States are planted by non-immigrant labor who come to the country for 6 months and go back to their country of origin. And prior to hiring those workers, these companies who employ them would gladly employ American workers, but they can't do so. They search for them. They're required to advertise for American workers, but every year, roughly 2 to 4% of American workers take the jobs available. Obviously, markets for all products that come off an acre of land. And this is, during the Trump administration, FRA was involved in the National Economic Council, and they saw the lumber prices going up, and what they wanted to do was some type of regulation. So we met with them, I think 2 or 3 times to avoid unnecessary government regulation in the lumber side of things, and explain what was going on there. But the other thing that's important to realize that, and a lot of people don't, that from every acre you get saw logs, you get pulpwood, and you get biomass. And for the loggers who are harvesting the trees, so much of your profit margin depends on volume, and the more volume you have, the better margin you're going to have. So we really need to have markets in all regions for all products that come off the same acre. Scott had mentioned the loggers and timber harvest, the PATH program, and the Paycheck Protection Program provided assistance to these loggers who lost business, no fault of their own. And what concerns me here is that the sheer number of people who applied for Paycheck Protection Program and the PATH program are we at an issue where logging capacity, which is really one of those things you don't know it's gone until it's gone. Should we be looking at this whole area of logging capacity, and what can we do to make sure we have enough folks to harvest the trees for the markets that will be available? Transportation, another important part of the wood fiber supply chain. We are looking at a shortage of drivers in the transportation sector, nearing 80,000, and that will continue to grow unless we address that. There were a couple beneficial things in the infrastructure bill to get young drivers and apprenticeship programs to increase the number of drivers out there, women in the workforce, which I'll talk about those a little bit later. And obviously the market side, some of these markets are doing better than others. Lumber, construction is doing well, mixed bag in the paper sector. And really we need to explore this biomass sector. And part of that is making sure that biomass is recognized as carbon neutral in planning and policy. A couple weeks ago, FRA published a blog on a fiber supply chain. You can look at this on our website and all our Woods to Mill blogs at your leisure. But some of the things we found out by just talking to our members is that, the supply chain issues are really impacting this industry. It's causing in woods production to go down, lack of trucking. You're seeing a lot of mills across the country which are having problems with trucking, and their wood inventories are low. Land managers are seeing significant cost increases in road building. The culverts, for instance, are up 100% over 2019 prices, and fertilizers and herbicides are as much as 125% more expensive than previous years. If your equipment breaks and you're looking for parts, or you're looking for new equipment, in a lot of cases, those parts and equipment are 6 months to a year out. I talked to one trucking company, and they can't get trailers for their trucks. They were looking at walking trailers, and they're a year or more out. So all these delays are increasing the cost, making the supply chain less efficient. So what I'd like to do now is just kind of the big picture of what's we can expect Congress to do up to the midterms. And you probably noticed there's a lot of partisanship between the Republicans and the Democrats. And not only that, but throughout the country, there seems to be a lot of division. The Build Back Better bill, the Voting Rights Act, two key flagships of the Biden administration's political agenda have stalled. Personally, I don't think the Republicans are going to allow them to take any parts of the Build Back Better plan and have a victory. Some folks may disagree with me on that, but I think it's really, really hard, and it's going to be really difficult to get 60 votes out of the Senate to support any provisions of the Build Back Better plan. And those will have to wait, like I mentioned, for the Farm Bill or other venues, and likely after the midterm elections. Budgets, the House has been more active on funding the government. We are currently in our second continuing resolution, which basically funds the government at the rate of the previous year. So we're in fiscal year 2022, and what happens with a continuing resolution, that budget or fiscal year 2021 is just move forward. We have a couple provisions in the Homeland Security and the Interior Appropriations Committees. In Homeland Security, we have discretionary language that would allow more forestry workers to enter the U.S. to plant trees, to fight fires, to do timber stand improvement work, among that pine straw collection. And in the Interior Appropriations Committee, in both the House and the Senate, we have language that recognizes biomass as carbon neutral and directs federal agencies in their regulatory actions, which is important to recognize that carbon neutrality. And the problem here, we've been doing that for the last 4 or 5 years, I think since 2017. And what we really need is some permanency, so we can get markets developed, we can have businesses start breaking ground and put up, energy facilities that utilize biomass. The other thing that's going to happen here is at some point, if you look at Biden's job approval, the black line, that has been on kind of a free fall since August. And eventually you're going to see Democrats start pulling away from Biden's social agenda and carve a path for themselves if they want to be reelected. And, it's kind of flattened out for a little bit, gone up, but most recently with all the negative economy news, his ratings are on the way back down. And elections and the midterms have not been kind to the president's party. You can see this chart, the down bar, just so the number of seats that folks will lose. So we anticipate, a number of folks anticipate that this year, the House will lose roughly 40 to 60 seats on the Democrat Party, and Republicans will pick those up. I don't think it's going to be that high. I do think, the Republicans will take over the House, and they do have a fairly good shot at taking over the Senate. If you look at the House, Republicans just need to gain 5 seats to take control of the House. And a lot of the Democrats are jumping ship for various reasons, family, just the the partisanship issues. But 26 Democrats have left, will leave the party and will not seek re-election. And 11 Republicans have left that as well. The other issue that is out there is redistricting. 17 states are working on drawing lines based on the new census. And a lot of the states, I think only a few have been approved. Others are in litigation. I think in North Carolina, just last week, the judge ruled the lines drawn were not done correctly, lack of a better word, and they will have to go back to the drawing board, which will obviously delay midterms, and the drawing of the boundaries will certainly impact the elections. So we look in the Senate, the dark red, the dark blue, those are seats that are considered locked. The toss-up seats are the same states that provided the path for President Biden's victory, those being Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. So the Senate Republicans, if they pick up one seat, they will have the majority, and Biden's agenda will be very difficult to implement, and perhaps we can get back to folks working together and getting some policy that benefits all Americans passed. Just now, which we'll talk about some of the policy efforts more directly. If you look at the paper sector, the chart on the table, I should say, on the left, it's a mixed bag. Container board, tissue, they're trending upward. The issue that we've seen over the last decade or longer is the printing and writing paper. They are declining, and they will continue to decline. Right now, this segment is benefiting from mill closures over the period of the pandemic. The chart on the right shows housing construction, and you can see the home construction is increasing. And the thing that concerns me on that is that dark blue line. You can see the permits compared to starts. So that could be an issue of the supply chain not having the materials for building those homes. So the supply chain may have an impact on these housing starts moving forward. Just a little bit about the COVID impacts on the paper sector. So if you look at the impacts of printing and writing paper segment, you can see the production of those mills and what was taken off the market. On the right-hand side, there are, I think, 24 mills there that took downtime, closed permanently, or have taken indefinite downtime. Of those 24, there's 6 or 7 that have not opened, and will not. And a lot of those indefinites probably won't be reopened. And again, that capacity off the market, you'll be seeing in the short term anyhow, paper companies really having a good year for 2021 they've had, and likely moving into 2022 as people went back to schools and people went back to work. They tend to use more paper. Logging capacity, and this is something I think that needs to be looked at. I know in the lake states, surveys are done in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and they coordinate them to ask the same questions. They've been doing this for quite a while, and it really gives a good pulse on the logging sector and the health of the logging sector, and what actions need to be taken to improve, if any. But we mentioned the Paycheck Protection Program and the PATH program, which provided financial assistance. And this is just a case study done by Forest, a think tank in Georgia. So this is when the mill closed in 2014. And you can see that area that supplied the wood went on for 1 or 2 years with the logging capacity, and then really fell off. So the question we have in many parts of the country is, with the number of applicants to the financial assistance programs, are we seeing a shift in this curve where mills have closed and folks have taken financial assistance, and rightfully so, but are we seeing this shift of the curve and prolonging this decrease in logging capacity? The flip side there is this will allow loggers to stay in business, and hopefully the markets recover in those areas where the printing and writing paper sector was hit so hard. If you look at the PATH program, the states that took the most applicants and money, I think it was Mississippi, Wisconsin, Maine, and I think Washington was those are the 4 highest ones who took assistance from that program. So policy, The biomass obviously is a important market that we need to develop. And what's holding that back is Congress. Right now, like I mentioned earlier, we've been successful in having discretionary language put in appropriations, spending bills, but that language is only good for 1 year. So we got to up it every year. And again, you don't have the certainty with, if you're not going to invest in a facility with a 1 year guarantee of that biomass markets will be there. So Scott mentioned a renewable fuel standard. They're expanding that. That'll be capped by the amount of gallons produced by that program. And we really need to look at biomass in the energy sector. The Forest Service just got $3.3 billion from the infrastructure bill. They got another jump in money with additional funding in the continuing resolution. So they just got like $4 billion to manage fire-prone areas. And right now there's no markets for that land. And if you have incentives similar to the solar and the wind industry, where you have these 50% tax credits to build those facilities, if biomass had something like that, I think you'd see some facilities building their businesses for energy and providing markets for the logging sector. The other thing is the clean energy standard. We're likely to see some type of clean energy standard, and the ones we've seen to date that have been passed in the House but not in the Senate have not been very favorable to biomass. So we've worked with a number of associations to develop a biomass definition, which is all inclusive for the forest product manufacturing facilities. And if you look down here, includes forest derived biomass as well. So this amendment is ready to slide into any clean energy standard that comes forward. And we've been working this definition with a number of offices to make sure it's on our radar when a clean energy standard eventually is worked out between the Democrats and Republicans. Forest carbon, again, trees are being recognized as a solution to climate change. And there's a lot of regulatory practices being considered right now. One of those is the climate smart forestry practices. The USDA had to scale back a program from being the bank for carbon credits for forestry. It turned out they didn't have the right to do that and use the funds they were looking at to pay landowners to implement these practices. So they scaled it down and put it in the regulations and are calling to develop pilot projects for climate smart forestry practices. And our position on these has been, you got to recognize the fact that these programs need to benefit everyone, and practices that pay landowners to not cut trees isn't something we can support. And you really need to recognize the supply impacts of these practices and make sure they are implemented to benefit everybody. So what FRA did is we think a lot of this debate is going to be at the state level. So we pulled together with a contractor to put together forest carbon report cards for every state. And what it provides is information so folks can have discussions with the benefits of forests in carbon storage and carbon sequestration. And you can see as forests typically get older, this is sequestration, the amount of oxygen they take in or carbon they take in and release oxygen. As you see, as forests get older, they tend to be net emitters of carbon. So this is a key point I think is missing in the whole carbon discussion in Congress is forests just don't continue to absorb large amounts of carbon if they get old. They actually become very inefficient at doing so. You can get these on our website if you hop on there to take a look. Transportation, I mentioned the infrastructure bill. There was a number of things FRA worked on with several groups to get this done. One is a drive safe pilot program, which is being implemented as we speak. This program would allow young drivers under 21 years of age to participate in a program that would, and a large majority of the program would be behind the wheel training with an experienced driver. And this program, once these drivers are done with the program, it would be allowed to travel interstate. Right now, drivers under 21 years of age can travel, the whole length of Ohio, but they can't travel across state boundaries. So this would work to get more people into the driving sector. And part of this is the Department of Transportation will be collecting safety data in the pilot program over a 3-year period so they can make comparisons as to whether or not these drivers are a higher risk than other drivers. The other legislation is women in trucking. Congressman Gallagher had this legislation added to the infrastructure bill. Gallagher also worked with FRA to develop the language for the Safe Routes Act. And this bill develops an advisory board that works to recruit more women truck drivers. Currently, I think there's 8 or 10% of the trucking force are women. So getting more women into the trucking force certainly would address the 80,000 or so trucking driver shortage. Scott mentioned the grandfather interstate exemption in North Carolina. When those interstates are built, the logging and other sectors will be able to travel the interstate at weights that were legal prior to the interstate being built. And they had a number of actions for workforce development in the trucking industry and improving education and training and implementing a CDL program and giving states money to train drivers quicker. One thing we need to watch on the regulation side is the Biden administration has identified a Trump ruling that came out in September that really helped short haul distance drivers, which loggers are included. They increased the hours of service, or not the hours of service in a day, not the drive time, but the amount of time a worker can work. And as you know, there's a lot of wait time in the truck that would not go towards the hours of service or downtime. And the Biden administration is looking to reverse that rule, and we're keeping an eye out for that to make sure that does not happen. And FRA has also looked at Safe Routes Act. We've looked at, that's supposed to be on there, 2 regions of the country, the Lake States and Southeast region. We looked at Alabama, North, South Carolina, and Georgia. And this whole thought of moving trucks to the interstate at legal state weights to show the safety and efficiency benefits. And what we found out is the research that we've completed is that, we found out it's safer for our trucks to travel on the interstate as opposed to traveling back roads in rural areas where they have school zones, stop signs, intersections, all that increase the rate of accidents. There's less fuel consumption, there's less carbon emissions, faster travel times, and less damage to roads. The research in Minnesota, they're looking at accident analysis. So one of the things, and this is ongoing, should be completed here in the next month or so, is that they looked at the database of accidents of log trucks compared to other log trucks, and across the United, I think it was the lower 48 states, but there's no evidence to suggest that log trucks are more dangerous than trucks traveling with other products. And where exemptions exist for heavier weights on the interstates, log trucks were actually safer than compared to those other trucks. So this findings we'll use to promote Safe Routes Act. I think Scott's right. Prior to Scott coming on board, we did discuss with Danny Drucker a couple things. One was 6 axles, and the other was breaking down the interstates just to do sections so that trucks could avoid towns and school zones and those types of hazards. So I think Scott's right. We do got to change gears, so to speak, and consider those 2 options, 6 axles. And instead of getting the entire interstate exempt, looked at portions of states to exempt from or allow trucks to travel on the interstate. FRA has a number of videos you can look at, and we've really did this since COVID, since it's very difficult to meet with legislators. So our messaging has been a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of information shared through these videos. I'll try and share one of these with you right now. Get out of here.
Right now, it is forced.
I'll tee this up a little bit. This is the information video we put together for the Safe Routes Act to show the benefits of the legislation.
One of these logging trucks is more likely to crash because of outdated federal regulations. A change in regulations could allow this one to access the interstate highway for a short distance. But right now, it is forced to drive only on state and county roads through small towns that increase the likelihood of an accident. Obsolete federal laws prevent trucks hauling at state-approved weights from traveling even short distances on safer and better built federal interstate highways in most states. Instead, these trucks are traveling through towns and populated areas where fatal crashes are 3 times more likely to occur. The current interstate laws prevent logging trucks from bypassing community streets, shopping areas, and college campuses. We can all agree that fewer logging trucks in our tight intersections, in our school zones, and near pedestrians is in everyone's best interest. Not only is the risk of an accident on interstates much lower, but interstate travel for logging trucks is much more fuel efficient, lowers logging carbon footprint, and does less damage to our road networks. When hauling at legal state weights, logging trucks should be able to access interstate highways, especially for short distances. It makes our communities safer, helps the environment, and is far more efficient. Find out more at forestresources.org/safe routes.
Okay, that's all I have. Any questions, show up, Brad?
I don't see any yet, Tim, but I'll make a few comments here while we're leaving it open here for anybody that's got a question. Please throw that up in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll see it. You mentioned some of the states that are drawing or redrawing their district lines after the census and stuff, and Ohio is one of those that the courts kicked it back to the committee, and so they were redrawing last weekend or early this week, and I think they've maybe come to another new agreement, but I guess we'll see whether the courts accept it or not. But they were one of the states that had to redraw their legislative districts.
Yeah, I think only 3 states have successfully got through the process, so I think you're going to see a lot more lawsuits.
Sure.
Where that really is a problem is the midterms.
Here's the monthly update for FRA for March 2021.
I think I'm playing another video.
You are.
There we go.
So another interesting thing I saw there was when you look at the PATH funds and the states that got the highest amount of assistance from that. My mind would think immediately that it's probably all going to be concentrated in the breadbasket of the U.S., the Southeast. But when you mentioned the top 4 states, you're talking the farthest Northeast state, the farthest Northwest state, except Alaska, one of the farthest south states with Mississippi, and then the upper Midwest. So, I mean, it was really dynamically spread out across the country as to states that needed assistance with their logging and trucking force.
Yeah, I think what all those have in common are large paper mills that shut down
Yes.
in those regions. Yep.
Yeah.
As you know, sawmills take volume, but paper mills take a lot more volume. That doesn't meet a saw log criteria.
Right. Right. Well, any of our panelists have any other questions or thoughts for Tim? Otherwise, we'll bring Jeff on board for just a moment there. Jeff, if you're available, why don't you introduce yourself to these folks?
Yeah. Thanks, Brad, and thanks, Tim. Those are great slides, and also the video, so I could watch that for a while longer. But anyway, I don't have any slides, but I wanted to speak a little bit in reference to the Appalachian region, a little bit of my background and what I do for FRA. So I had been in the forest products industry, paper industry specifically, for over 30 years, and also had been a member with FRA for that long also. So I'm pretty familiar with FRA. Less than a year ago, if any of you know Rick Meyer, he was previous regional manager for the Appalachian region. He retired in June, and I took over as the region consultant. So anyway, Appalachian region is made up of states from Missouri, east to Maryland, going south to Tennessee. And as you can imagine, the topography in our region is pretty rough. You have a lot of trees growing, but they're kind of hard to get to sometimes. So a lot of manual cutting, cable skidding. That's pretty common within our region. So anyway, I'm working with members that are within the Appalachian region. We look at kind of putting the regions together based on common issues or common logging systems. We have 6 regions. That's the Western region, Lake States, Northeast, Appalachian, South Central, and Southeast. So anyway, with regard to the Appalachian region, I get with members, I travel our region, talk to people, find out what the issues are, and try to get everyone together to solve the problems we have. We do a few things that are pretty good. Last fall, or every fall, we have a regional meeting. So if you're in the Appalachian region, you can make time and try to get in on the regional meeting that we have. Last fall in particular, we had to cancel that regional meeting, but we did have a field tour, which was in Pineville, West Virginia, and that was to look at a tethered logging system. So logging system operating on steep slopes, pretty unique, and we had members that came to see that. So you get a lot of opportunity to visit with folks in different areas, also network. You meet a lot of new friends and people that you probably carry those relationships throughout your career. So if you're interested in that, I'm on the FRA website, jjenkins@forestresources.org, and you could get in touch with me. I'd be glad to give you a call, talk about a little bit about what FRA does and what we're about, and why I think it would be a good match with maybe looking into membership. So I think that'll cover everything that I'm thinking of, Brad.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. And I want to thank you and Tim both for being on here. And I'll thank Scott again later. Just want to, leave it open just a couple minutes longer here, for any of the participants, if you've got any questions for Tim, Jeff, or myself, or anybody else here.
Jeff or Tim, I was wondering if you might be able to sort of explain how FRA and the American Loggers Council fit in with some of the more localized programs, such as the state forestry programs? And if you're a member of one, how should you view membership in some of these other organizations, and how do you put your time and effort as a logger or somebody in a local area in some of these larger, more nationally focused programs?
Jeff, why don't you go ahead?
I knew you were going to do that to me. Really, it is a matter of trying to put your time in. You only have so much of it, so we try to work together. Obviously, with ALC and FRA, a lot of times we partner with things that we do, and just like on this webinar, you could hear we have a lot of the common issues and problems, so we work together on that. I would just advise anyone that's just looking to the organizations. We're all working for the same cause in a lot of ways, so see what fits, and if you can only join one, then pick the best fit. I'd say join both of them. We do offer two, similar things, but still unique perspectives also.
And Ben, I'll chip in a little bit there, I guess, and to say that for the Ohio Forestry Association, we know that not all of our members are going to join FRA or the American Loggers Council. So our association joins FRA to help give some representation. And then our Ohio Logging Standards Council also has joined the American Loggers Council. So we get, somebody on the board, we get some representation there. And so we get that direct access for our loggers. I think, it'd be good for those national organizations if the individual loggers and companies would join them too, because I think there's a definite step there where they're giving us tremendous national level, legislative experience and stuff that we're not going to get out of all the state associations. There's a definite benefit to being both.
Yeah, I just to add to that, I was once told by Butch Johnson that everyone should be. He runs several businesses in the Lake States, that you need to be part of all member associations. They have certain benefits that others don't. I would think FRA, what we tend to offer with our regional approach, it provides folks the networking opportunities to meet the entire forest product sector. Like I mentioned, our members are from large companies to trucking companies to allied businesses, and includes the loggers. On a national perspective, Brad, FRA runs a national association of forestry executives that provides information that becomes available for a lot of folks. And we also work not only with the American Loggers Council, but American Forest Paper Association, National Land Association of Forest Owners, American Wood Council, American Forest Foundation, Farm Bureau. So through FRA, you get, policy information through all those groups. And we definitely share that with the associations at the state level. So join your state associations and pick the national one, which you think best benefits you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tim. Good question, Ben. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Any other questions for tonight's session here? If not, Tim, Jeff, again, thank you very much. This was very informative. I'm sure the folks that weren't on here live tonight that'll watch it later will pick up a lot of really good stuff from that. Loggers, February 22nd, next episode or next webinar is drones for loggers. I think you're going to find that to be really interesting. And we got to thank you, everyone, from Anthony Beam. Thank you for that. If nobody else has anything, thanks again for joining us tonight, guys, and you're welcome to go home and finish enjoying dinner.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks.